talk a little bit about the DA, because we've spoken a lot about the ANC. How do you think the leadership of the DA evolves over the next 5 years?
I think it remains pretty much what it is, but you must think of the DA, you can think of it in various guises, and a common way to think about the DA is that it must change itself to become attractive to traditional ANC voters so that it can get the 55% majority and govern the country without the need for a partner. Now this is all wrong, I think. It cannot happen like that, and nor should it, and I don't think the DA should even attempt to do anything of that nature. We come from a history of 400 years where very big, powerful actors determined how people within the country behaved, because at no point in that period were people free to choose their leaders. As soon as that starts to happen, which is when apartheid lived experience fades into the present reality, which is where we're at the moment, you saw it in the urban vote. As soon as that happens, what occurs is the politics begins to reflect the cultures of our society. And cultures aren't language groups and so on. And the DAs or ethnic groups or racial groups, they're not really those aren't the most important drivers. They're important, but they're not definitive. The DA at 25%, approaching 30%, has captured the urban, younger, aspirant, emerging and established middle-class voting market, completely cosmopolitan. And its function, I think, should remain to grow its share of that vote. But the share of that vote is going to max out at 30 or 35%. The ANC instead is, or what comes after it, of what it gives sort of life to after it's gone, is going to be about the third of the vote. That's the more fringe of that cosmopolitan urban world, more Africanist, slightly older, and very much poorer. And that makes complete sense for the ANC, and that's the market I think it should bring into the coalition deal with the DA. And beyond those two parties who've got their DA's a third of the vote or so, and the ANC a third or quarter or vice versa, doesn't really matter. We'll have a third party, which will be the hard left fringe, which will have 10 or 15%. And you can see the chart I showed in the course of this, what happens after Mr. Ramaphosa. The chart is appearing in your mind again. So the DA's got about a third, and this ANC sort of Africanist group, or whatever it will be, will have a third. So 2/3 is 60%, let's say, and the radical left, let's say, is 10 or 15, so let's go to 75. That leaves 25. The 25 will be small little splinter parties that represent narrow ethnic, nationalist, language groups, special interest groups, a few crazies, a few kind of religious right-inspired parties, whatever Zuma's up to in KZN. He could, if he does extremely well, get a few percentage points, I don't think much more than that. And what this description of the politics is actually an overlay of the broad cultures that form South African society in an environment where the members of those cultures are free to choose who they want to represent them. It can be a mistake to try and merge those cultures in one party or institution, because they can have competing interests, and those parties can then fight, and then they get paralyzed and they begin to atrophy. So the ANC is trying to merge the cultures of the honorable movement of the past with the looting and stealing of what happened to elements of that party. So it's completely paralyzed. However, taking different political cultures in their separate parties and taking them to a coalition negotiation works very well, where they are able to find common ground on questions like safety, or the creation of jobs, or good schools for kids. So I think it's a view widely held, particularly amongst the well-heeled, that what must happen is the DA must replace the ANC and sort of govern the country with a major majority. Firstly, it cannot happen. It's very difficult to do, much more difficult. And it's not necessary. And lastly, and most importantly, it could be very destructive. So I think the DA is doing exactly what it needs to do, in the way it needs to do it. And I think it's done well in getting to where it is. And it needs to be understood that it has now captured a third of the voting market, a block that will grow in time to whatever extent the economic growth rate allows it to. And it should consider, and I'm also careful of dictating to politicians, because there's some really good guys around who work very hard and have their own ideas, and they don't need analysts always to tell them what to do. But I think the DA should be regarded as very successful, and it will bring its market share to a future coalition negotiation.